Imagine tuning in to a live broadcast, only to discover that a policy meant to safeguard American jobs has triggered one of the most seismic shifts in the auto industry in decades. In today's video, we delve into how a 25% tariff on imported vehicles, a decision spearheaded by the Trump administration, has unintentionally propelled major automakers like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan to dramatically pull their production out of the United States. Far from bolstering domestic manufacturing, the new tariffs have upended long-standing operations, leading to staggering financial losses, supply chain chaos, and an economic ripple effect that is hitting American consumers and workers hard. If you're curious about how government policy can turn an industry on its head in less than one fiscal year, you've come to the right place. The policy at the heart of this upheaval is simple in theory but catastrophic in practice. In an attempt to reverse trade imbalances and bring production back to American soil, the Trump administration imposed a steep 25% tariff on imported cars not manufactured in the U.S. The idea was that by making foreign cars more expensive, American-made vehicles would become more competitively priced, thereby revitalizing domestic production, creating jobs, and boosting the economy. However, the reality rapidly diverged from these lofty intentions. Within months of the tariff announcement, the blueprint for a revived, Made in America, auto industry began to crumble. The very companies that once made headline-grabbing investments of over $10 billion in U.S. production facilities quickly reversed course. Instead of absorbing the extra costs by raising prices immediately, automotive giants recognized that the tariffs would squeeze profit margins so tightly that it was cheaper, and far less risky, to relocate their manufacturing operations to tariff-free zones. Toyota and Honda, two of the most storied names in global automotive history, have faced the brunt of these policy changes. When confronted with the prospect of a 25% levy on their vehicles destined for the U.S. market, both companies opted for a drastic solution. They moved their production operations from American soil to locations like Mexico and Southeast Asia. This strategic maneuver was not taken lightly. Hundreds of millions, and in some estimates, billions, of dollars in investments in American factories were suddenly rendered unsustainable under the new tariff regime. For Toyota, the decision was particularly painful. The company, which once invested heavily in U.S. production facilities to capitalize on the domestic market's potential, now finds itself grappling with a reported loss of approximately $12 billion. Honda, following a similar path, is staring down an $8 billion hit as it shuts down domestic plants and reallocates manufacturing operations to more favorable economic climates. Nissan, not to be outdone, seized the market opportunity by rapidly shifting focus to the affordable electric vehicle (EV) segment, a move designed to lure price-conscious and environmentally aware American consumers without incurring the high tariff costs. What makes this situation so compelling is the irony behind the policy. The tariffs were designed to keep American automakers on U.S. soil, but instead, they have spurred these companies to run from the United States. Relocating to nearby countries like Mexico not only helps these companies dodge the punitive tariffs, but also takes advantage of lower production costs and an absence of similar trade barriers. Even Hyundai and Kia, who were less embroiled in the domestic debate over tariffs, found themselves reconfiguring their production plans to optimize costs and avoid potential pitfalls. The direct consequences of these manufacturing shifts are already being felt on American roads. One of the most immediate impacts is on the price of vehicles. With tariffs inflating the cost of imported components and finished vehicles, consumers are now staring at sticker prices that could be $3,000 to $5,000 higher for popular models like SUVs. In some cases, the increase could be as steep as several $1,000s more than consumers were initially expecting, creating a deterrent that threatens to depress demand in a market already reeling under economic uncertainty. But it's not just consumers who are suffering. The entire U.S. auto supply chain is reeling from the fallout. Many of the small parts suppliers, which constitute about 80% of the industry's supply base, operate on razor-thin margins with fewer than 50 employees. These companies are particularly vulnerable to sudden market shocks. With automakers forced to reevaluate their sourcing strategies in the face of high tariffs, countless small businesses are finding themselves squeezed out of survival. As these suppliers struggle to cope with volatility in demand and cash flow issues, the risk of a domino effect looms large. One missing component in the chain could halt production lines and lead to even broader disruptions across the industry. Local factories that once thrived on the steady rhythm of American demand are now closing their doors, and estimates suggest that up to 2 million vehicles may go unsold in 2025 simply because soaring prices will leave consumers unable to justify the expense. The collapse of these small suppliers, compounded by the shuttering of larger domestic production facilities, paints a bleak picture: a supply chain in disarray, an auto industry facing unprecedented uncertainty, and a workforce hungry for stability in an economy caught in a tight vice. In a striking twist of fate, the tariff policies that were designed to reinvigorate the U.S. auto industry have instead accelerated a major strategic pivot for many automakers. Rather than doubling down on conventional internal combustion engine vehicles, companies like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan have redirected their investments toward hybrids and electric vehicle (EV) production. This is not merely a move to evade tariffs. It's a calculated strategy to capitalize on global trends toward cleaner, more efficient automotive technologies. Toyota, ever the pioneer in hybrid technology, has ramped up hybrid production in Japan. This move not only aims to satisfy the growing demand for fuel-efficient cars in the U.S., where consumers are becoming increasingly environmentally conscious, but also positions Toyota as the leader in the race for a cleaner automotive future. Honda and Nissan, following Toyota's lead, are expanding their product lines to include new hybrid and electric models designed to appeal to a market that values lower fuel costs and reduced environmental impact. By focusing on EVs and hybrids, these companies are effectively sidestepping the tariffs that have crippled traditional production models. They are investing in advanced technologies, reconfiguring their global supply chains, and making significant headway into the rapidly growing market for alternative energy vehicles. Even as domestic manufacturers struggle to adjust to the new economic landscape, Japanese automakers are quietly expanding their market share, not only in the United States but around the world. Their strategies highlight a key lesson. In times of economic turbulence, innovation and agility are far more effective than blunt policy interventions. The tariff-induced shifts in the automotive world extend far beyond the factory floor. The ripple effects are being felt in regions traditionally reliant on the auto industry. States like Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee, long the backbone of America's manufacturing might, are now grappling with a surge in plant closures and subsequent job losses. As factories shutter their doors and production lines are dismantled, tens of thousands of workers find themselves facing unemployment. These are not abstract statistics. They represent real people, families, and communities that depend on the steady income generated by auto manufacturing. The broader economic fallout is equally concerning. The auto industry is a linchpin in the U.S. economy, linked to not just vehicle assembly, but also to the vast network of suppliers, parts manufacturers, logistics companies, and dealerships that keep the system humming. When one cog in this well-oiled machine fails, the repercussions spread quickly. With parts shortages looming and the supply chain under immense strain, even the smallest disruption can trigger widespread production delays. The escalating costs are not isolated to the manufacturing process. They eventually make their way to consumers in the form of higher vehicle prices and more expensive maintenance, fueling a vicious circle of inflationary pressures. Financial markets are also reeling from the impact of these policies. Interest rates on car loans, for instance, have climbed to unprecedented levels, hovering between 6 and 7%, a stark departure from historical norms. This surge in borrowing costs is squeezing consumers even further, reducing the pool of potential buyers in an already turbulent market. With the twin pressures of high prices and dwindling consumer confidence, The prediction that 2 million fewer vehicles will be sold in 2025 is fast becoming a grim reality. Perhaps one of the most troubling aspects of this scenario is the way in which a single political decision can send shockwaves through an entire industry, and by extension, through the entire economy. The 25% tariff not only upends large-scale manufacturers, but also devastates the network of small suppliers that form the backbone of the auto industry. With many of these suppliers operating on minimal capital and staffing, even a small dip in orders can force them into insolvency. As these businesses crumble, their closures initiate a domino effect. Large manufacturers depend on a steady stream of quality components from these small companies. When these suppliers fail, production lines are forced to shut down, even if only temporarily, further compounding the production delays already caused by the tariff-induced changes. This cascade of failures does not end at the factory gates. Local economies that have long relied on the auto industry for employment and economic stability face sharp declines in revenue. Communities that once bustled with the energy of manufacturing operations now battle unemployment, economic contraction, and a grim uncertainty about the future. The human toll is immense. Thousands of dedicated workers, many of whom have spent their entire careers in automobile manufacturing, suddenly find themselves out of work. In regions where auto factories once represented the center of economic life, the closures are more than just statistics. They are the cause of personal hardship, community decline, and a growing mistrust of policies that promise prosperity but deliver disruption. No discussion of these sweeping changes would be complete without touching on the intense political and media reactions that have further muddied the waters. The tariffs were intended to serve as a rallying cry, a bold, decisive move by the Trump administration to reclaim American industry. Instead, however, political narratives have become a cacophony of conflicting messages, heated criticism, and biting satire. Critics argue that the policy was not a well-considered economic strategy, but rather a politically motivated stunt that has backfired in spectacular fashion. Trump's insistence that the tariffs would safeguard American jobs now appears increasingly ironic in light of the massive job losses and economic dislocations unfolding across the country. Political commentators have drawn vivid comparisons, likening Trump's approach to the incessant whir of a neighbor's leaf blower, a noisy, relentless distraction that ultimately irritates rather than improves the neighborhood. This metaphor has resonated widely, encapsulating the sentiment that the administration's policies are as disruptive as they are ineffective. Mainstream media outlets, particularly those traditionally aligned with Trump's narrative, are finding themselves in a difficult position. Fox News, for instance, has struggled to reconcile its defense of the administration with the stark economic realities facing the auto industry and the broader market. While some pundits continue to tout the resilience of the American economy, others have openly criticized the decision as nothing short of self-sabotage. The disconnect between optimistic proclamations from the White House and the grim economic data on the ground has only deepened public confusion and disillusionment. Adding fuel to the fire have been several controversial remarks made by President Trump himself, statements that not only downplay the severity of the economic crisis, but also demonstrate a deep insensitivity to historical tragedies. On one occasion, his comments regarding the Holocaust provoked widespread outrage, as observers decried the lack of empathy and the casual tone in his depiction of one of history's most tragic events. Such remarks have done little to instill confidence in leadership during a time when decisive, compassionate policies are needed. Instead, they serve to further erode public trust in an administration that appears increasingly out of step with the realities faced by everyday Americans. In the midst of this turmoil, a striking dichotomy has emerged. On one side, the U.S. auto industry, the very symbol of American manufacturing prowess, is marred by uncertainty, escalating costs, and a disintegrating supply chain. On the other side, foreign automakers, particularly those from Japan such as Toyota, Honda, and Nissan, are not only weathering the storm but are actively capitalizing on the new market dynamics by shifting their focus to EVs and hybrids. The pivot toward cleaner, more fuel-efficient vehicles is more than a mere response to tariffs. It is a forward-looking strategy aimed at capturing a market defined by stringent environmental standards and changing consumer behavior. While domestic manufacturers scramble to adapt, Japanese automakers are forging ahead with innovation, optimizing global supply chains, and investing heavily in new technologies. Their efforts have allowed them to maintain, and in some cases expand, their market share in the United States, even as the Buy American rhetoric grows louder. Take Toyota's rapid expansion of hybrid production as an illustrative example. Rather than clinging to an outdated production model that the tariffs have rendered unsustainable, Toyota doubled down on developing vehicles that offer fuel efficiency and lower operational costs. This strategic shift not only positions the company favorably in a market increasingly receptive to green technology, but also insulates it from the disruptive impact of tariff-induced cost hikes. Honda and Nissan have followed similar strategies, rolling out impressive lineups of hybrid and electric models aimed at appealing to American consumers, who are more concerned than ever about rising fuel prices and environmental degradation. The success of these foreign automakers underscores a crucial lesson. In times of economic and regulatory upheaval, flexibility and innovation are paramount. While U.S. manufacturers remain bogged down by the legacy of outdated policies and an inflexible production paradigm, companies willing to invest in future-oriented technologies are reaping the rewards. This divergence represents not only a shift in industrial strategy, but also a fundamental reordering of global economic power within the auto sector. As Japanese automakers continue to refine their techniques and capture market share, the U.S. risks relegating itself to a secondary role in an industry that is rapidly evolving toward eco-friendly, technologically advanced solutions. The automotive sector is a microcosm of larger economic trends. The ramifications of the tariff policy extend beyond production lines and assembly plants. They are indicative of a broader challenge facing the entire U.S. economy. In an era marked by rapid globalization and technological disruption, protectionist policies can sometimes produce unintended consequences that undermine the very industries they are meant to protect. With rising interest rates on auto loans and inflationary pressures throwing the economy into further disarray, the prospects for average consumers are becoming increasingly grim. As car prices climb and loan rates hit historic highs, many Americans are forced to delay purchases, opting to hang onto aging vehicles rather than risk the financial burden of a new model. This contraction in consumer spending not only stifles the auto market, but also sends shockwaves through related sectors such as parts manufacturing, logistics, and retail dealerships. Local economies, especially in regions reliant on auto production, are bearing the brunt of these disruptions. The closures of factories in states like Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee are not isolated incidents. They represent the unraveling of entire communities that once depended on a steady industrial heartbeat. Schools, hospitals, and small businesses that thrived on the economic activity generated by these plants now face an uncertain future. The loss of tens of thousands of jobs is a stark reminder that economic policies, when misdirected, can translate directly into personal hardship and community decay. Moreover, the domino effect in the automotive supply chain further exacerbates the situation. Many small parts suppliers, already teetering on the edge due to minimal capital reserves and lean operational models, are unable to absorb the shockwaves sent by drastic production shifts. One missing component, one delayed shipment, can halt production entirely, leading to a vicious cycle of inefficiency and escalating costs. This multi-layered economic disturbance demonstrates how a single policy decision can disrupt not only an industry, but also the entire ecosystem of businesses and workers dependent on its stability. At its core, the controversy surrounding these tariffs is as much about public perception as it is about economics. The policy was heralded by its proponents as a bold move to reclaim American manufacturing and push back against what they saw as unfair trade practices. Yet, as the reality of massive job losses, supply chain disruptions, and soaring vehicle prices sinks in, the narrative has dramatically shifted. Critics demand accountability, arguing that the policy is symptomatic of a broader trend of short-sighted decision-making that prioritizes political posturing over economic pragmatism. The disconnect between the Trump administration's optimistic proclamations and the increasingly dire data emerging from affected industries has created a fertile ground for media satire and political parody. Television hosts and commentators have employed biting humor to draw attention to the absurdity of a policy that appears to benefit only a handful of wealthy corporations and foreign manufacturers, at the expense of hardworking American families. For instance, one recurring theme in the criticism involves the portrayal of Trump as a leader whose policies are as disruptive as a neighbor's incessant leaf blower, noisy, relentless, and ultimately counterproductive. This metaphor, though delivered with humor, encapsulates a broader frustration. Policies ostensibly designed to strengthen the nation are instead unleashing chaos, leaving the public to bear the brunt of economic instability. Adding another layer to the critique are several inflammatory remarks made by Trump on various topics, including insensitive comments regarding historical tragedies. Such remarks have not only deflected attention from the growing economic crisis, but have also deepened the public's distrust in leadership. When a leader's words seem detached from the pain and hardship experienced by everyday citizens, it becomes increasingly difficult for the public to take the administration's policy claims at face value. Instead, the nation is left grappling with an unsettling question. How can those in power steer the country out of crisis when their statements only serve to further undermine confidence? This political and media battle is more than just a war of words. It is a struggle for public trust. As traditional allies in the media attempt to reconcile their support with mounting evidence of economic mismanagement, viewers are left with a fragmented picture of an auto industry in turmoil and an economy teetering on the edge. The contrast between the optimistic rhetoric of revitalizing American jobs and the harsh realities of plant closures, soaring prices, and worker layoffs is stark. And increasingly, it is the narrative of everyday Americans that is capturing the public's attention. As we reflect on these dramatic developments, several critical lessons emerge. First among them is the inherent risk of policy decisions made without fully anticipating the complex interplay of global markets. The 25% tariff, intended to protect American jobs and stimulate domestic production, has instead unleashed a series of unintended consequences that stretch far beyond the automotive sector. By ignoring the integrated nature of global supply chains and the competitive advantages enjoyed by foreign manufacturers, policymakers have not only destabilized an entire industry, but also set off a chain reaction affecting countless businesses and workers. Second, the situation underscores the imperative for innovation in a rapidly evolving economic landscape. The rapid pivot by Japanese automakers to EVs and hybrids demonstrates that, in an era defined by technological progress and environmental consciousness, clinging to outdated production models can be perilous. Rather than attempting to retrofit an industry with policies designed for a bygone era, the future belongs to those companies willing to invest in new technologies, adapt to changing consumer preferences, and embrace the inevitability of global competition. Third, this tumultuous episode serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of economic mismanagement. Behind the headlines and the debates over policy are real people, factory workers, small business owners, and families whose livelihoods have been upended by decisions made in the corridors of power. The loss of jobs, the shuttering of local factories, and the uncertainty of financial stability are not abstract figures on a spreadsheet. They are the lived experiences of communities across the country. In light of these realities, it becomes imperative for both policymakers and industry leaders to weigh their decisions not just in terms of economic benefit, but in terms of human impact. Finally, the unfolding drama highlights the critical role of accountability and transparency in governance. As public trust wanes and political narratives clash, the need for clear, honest communication has never been greater. Consumers, workers, and communities deserve to understand not only the rationale behind policy decisions, but also the full breadth of their consequences. Only through an open dialogue that bridges the gap between political ambition and economic reality can the nation hope to chart a course toward recovery and stability. Today's story is a testament to the profound impact that a single policy decision can have on the fabric of an entire industry, and by extension, on the lives of countless individuals. The sudden imposition of a 25% tariff on imported vehicles was intended to create a surge in domestic production, to reaffirm the promise of Made in America, and to protect jobs. Instead, it has sparked a chain reaction. Major automakers have repositioned their global strategies, supply chains have fractured, and local economies that once thrived on steady production are now facing an uncertain future. In the midst of this whirlwind of change, the narrative is not all doom and gloom. The global pivot toward cleaner, more innovative automotive technologies offers a glimmer of hope, a prospect that the industry may eventually reinvent itself in ways that are both economically viable and environmentally sustainable. However, that future will require a recalibration of policies and a renewed commitment to supporting the very workers and communities affected by yesterday's decisions. For viewers who want to understand how intricate economic policies can reshape industries almost overnight, this video offers a window into a real-world case study of unintended consequences. It invites us to consider not just the numbers, be it billions in lost revenue, job cuts, or rising consumer prices, but also the human stories behind those figures, the hardworking factory employees, the small business owners at the mercy of a fragile supply chain, and the families who watch their dreams erode as the market shifts around them. As we move forward, the lessons from today's upheaval should serve as a cautionary tale for future policymaking. Economic decisions made in haste or without a holistic understanding of global interdependencies can have ripple effects that are difficult, if not impossible, to reverse. Instead of retreating into isolationist policies, the focus should be on innovation, collaboration, and the creation of resilient systems, one that can adapt to changing demands and weather the storms of economic uncertainty. In summary, the dramatic series of events set off by the 25% tariff has altered the landscape of the U.S. auto industry in ways that reverberate far beyond production plants and dealership lots. Major international players have leveraged the situation to reposition themselves for future success, while American manufacturers and local communities face the daunting challenges of a fractured supply chain, escalating costs, and job losses. The story is one of missed opportunities, a scenario where a well-intentioned policy designed to protect domestic interests has instead catalyzed a shift that could have lasting repercussions on the nation's economic vitality.